All right, joined by Ross Jackson, of course, of the Locked on Saints podcast. Now that it's over, we can look back on this process and say he was a guy, we don't know if he was the guy the Saints identified from the beginning, but the Saints clearly identified him from the start, virtually interviewed him as soon as they could, flew to Philadelphia on the first day they could, and then stopped the process after that. They had identified him as at least a strong candidate from day one, right?
Yeah, I would consider him probably, if you were to put maybe a tier list together and kind of group them in clouds, I think he was probably a top tier guy. You had to imagine that guys like Mike Vrabel and Aaron Glenn were all up there as well. But I think that what this shows you is that Kellen Moore was somebody that they pinpointed early and said, that's a coach that we would want to work with. 36 years old, young offensive mind, and a complete departure from what they've known before.
Yeah, and that's the big thing that both you and I have talked about this multiple times. The one thing we wanted to see, look, Sean Payton's here for 16 years, did a spectacular job. Then Dennis Allen is billed as though we're going to keep Sean Payton's legacy going. By bringing in Kellen Moore, this is a clear acknowledgement from the Saints organization that the Payton era is over and it's time to start again. They're not going to call it that, but it's time to start a new era, right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think you're right that the public line will be different than, sort of what the decision is and the reality. But that's fine. That's what you expect in these situations. And I think that even you look back to last year, they brought in Clint Kubiak to be the offensive coordinator to bring the Shanahan system over, the Kubiak system over, but they were still running that with the same players that they brought in to run Sean Payton's system with Pete Carmichael. So I think that even then you didn't really see a departure from it. And then a new defensive coordinator, new offensive coordinator, potentially new special teams coordinator as well. You're going to see a complete shift towards a new idea.
Yeah, there's no doubt that this is the beginning, the end of an era and the beginning of an era, and that's great. It was 19 years, and anyone who watched the Saints the last 2 or 3 years, that era was over. And look, the one thing that I find most interesting about how the process played out is 2 weeks ago, all the criticism the Saints were dealing with. Mike McCarthy drops out, Joe Brady drops out, Cliff Kingsbury doesn't want a second interview. And what we know now is Mike McCarthy was really never a strongly considered candidate. We don't know how strongly considered Joe Brady or Cliff Kingsbury were, but we know Kellen Moore was prioritized at the highest level, and the Saints got him. And now, after the Super Bowl performance, KC had given up 40 points in 4 years since the COVID season. He gets 40 on the biggest stage in American sports. Now, people are like, I stayed. Good move. I see it. And that was not the narrative 2 weeks ago, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a panic button that was pushed very, very quickly and it started when Aaron Glenn decided to take the Jets job without ever coming to New Orleans to an in-person interview, and then got magnified. So a second alarm was hit when Joe Brady, somebody that started his professional career here in New Orleans, ended up saying, nah, I'm good, and never even interviewed with him outside of the virtual interview. And then the McCarthy one, as you mentioned. And so the panic just kind of built and built and built and built. And then now all of a sudden there's kind of this nice opportunity to kind of sit back and go, breath of relief. There's a new offensive-minded head coach on the way to New Orleans that represents a very, very new future for this team.
And a guy who has had phenomenal success very recently in the NFL. And look, would you rather be Jacksonville that got Liam Cohen, who's got one solid year, but not the track record of Kellen Moore, or be Dallas?
Well, no one would want to be
Dallas.
No
one would want to be Dallas. But now you're looking at a team that, you know what, maybe the process wasn't wrong, and the Saints' entire mojo wants to be the, we know what we're doing. We're not in a rush. We're the cool, calm, collected organization who's not going to panic. And clearly, in this case, it appears to have paid off.
Absolutely. I mean, you get a Super Bowl winner fresh off of winning that Super Bowl now to come and be the person that pioneers your next frontier here as the New Orleans Saints. And that's a massive win for New Orleans and for this organization that dealt with all of that criticism, that has been dealing with criticism based on the head coach position over the course of the past few years.
People saying nobody's going to want this job.
No one wants the job,
and it turns out maybe look, Aaron Glenn is an incredible candidate. He was my number one guy. I'm still saying that. And Mike Vrabel was a great candidate. Ben Johnson's a great candidate. But Kellen Moore, right now, based on what he did in the Super Bowl, looks like as good a candidate as there was on the market. And the Saints, despite all the problems and all the nobody wants to go there's, the Saints got one of the top tier candidates to come coach their team.
Yeah, not a bad situation for New Orleans. Certainly not a consolation prize in any way, as we said that this was an identification early on. And I think that you get with Kellen Moore somebody that not only represents a change of ideals and a shift into a new vision, but he's also somebody that brings an explosive offense. How does he do it? Through adaptability. Through the willingness to adjust, playing to the strengths of his players and his roster, and then making sure that he's also, making sure he's playing to match up offense, matchup football, which is what used to find so much success here in New Orleans, finally a shift back to that. And so if they're able to bring that in and over the course of the next few years implement the personnel that can run that offense and execute that offense, they'll be right back into some potential contender conversations.
Look, I know you have done this, but I also know you personally enough to know that you have done this at a level above 10. You have deep dived into Kellen Moore's football past.
Yes.
What he's done at multiple stops, and I know the information is exploding out of your head. Here is the question, though. The more you've looked into him, do you like him more the deeper you go into the ground, or do you like him less? Like, how would you describe what you've learned and how your thoughts on him have evolved?
I like him a lot more now than I did at the beginning of the process. This is a guy at 17 years old when he was being recruited by Boise State.
Okay, time out.
You said that I dug deep. Let me tell you how I dug deep.
And I apologize for my voice. I'm still Super Bowl hoarse. These are the details I wanted. You start when he's 17. All right, I apologize. I couldn't get past that. 17-year-old Kellen Moore, go.
Gets a recruiting visit from Boise State, and you know what he shows them? Not, here's what I could do as a quarterback. He says, here's my playbook that I've already built. He showed up it's in his DNA to be a head coach. This is what he's always wanted. His dad coached him, all these other things. He learned it from his dad. And so he had a playbook that he showed him.
He had designed?
That plays that he had designed, taken from other places, taken from other people. Sure. He used to buy playbooks and online and read their playbooks and things like that. And so like learning that, and then now watching the way that he has molded, changed, developed. He was one of the winningest quarterbacks in college football history, and then has molded, changed, the winningest, and then has molded and changed as a coach in the NFL. Different style quarterbacks, different style offenses, different head coaches that he's working with, and watch him find success in each of those stops. I think those are the things that are kind of the cornerstones for why I like him more now than when I began my deep dive on him.
And the one thing we don't know about him yet, can he be the alpha dog to take charge of that room? I feel like the ship has been sort of rudderless for the last couple of years. There's no one saying this is the way it's going to be. And to have success in the NFL, you have to be that guy. He hasn't needed to be that guy. You think he can be?
I think that we saw a glimpse of it during the Super Bowl performance. A.J. Brown down the right sideline gets called for an offensive pass interference. Kellen Moore is in the face yelling at an official, a guy that he can get fined for yelling for. He ain't gonna get fined for yelling at his players. And so if he's able to bring that fire and translate that to the way that he leads within the facility, that I think will bring something. It doesn't have to be that specifically, but I think that will bring something. And the people that he surrounds himself with on his coaching staff can help to create that as well.
And the people we have heard that he may be surrounding himself with are great names. Doug Nussmeier, longtime veteran, of course, a former Saints quarterback. Of course, his son is the quarterback at LSU, but has followed Kellen Moore at different stops. Brandon Staley, we've heard his name, the head coach, former head coach of the Chargers. Those guys would bring real experience and head coaching experience. I think those guys could be guys that could really help him. Have you heard names? And those names are at the top, right?
Yeah, those names are certainly the top ones when it comes to defensive coordinator and offensive coordinator, or rather offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, respectively. I think the thing that you highlighted in one of our most recent talks around Brandon Staley that's really important too is that he's a Vic Fangio guy. I was with him, I believe it was in Chicago before going with him over to Denver, became the defensive coordinator Staley did with the Rams for a year before taking that Chargers job. And so we see the success of a Kellen Moore offense and a Vic Fangio defense. You can kind of already see that. And so that complement, I think, works. A couple of other names to watch out for. His little brother, Kirby Moore, is the offensive coordinator as well as quarterback coach with Missouri. They've had two, I believe, 10-plus win seasons now in the SEC in the past 2 seasons.
And Missouri runs a fun offense.
Very fun offense. So he would be an interesting one to watch, maybe as a quarterback's coach or something like that, assuming Nussmeier takes the offensive coordinator position or gets the offensive coordinator position. And I would also watch out for Eric Henderson as well, former New Orleans native.
Edna Carr.
Yep, and then having some time to be able to come in and coach that defensive line, because now the Saints have an opening there. He was phenomenal as a defensive line coach with the Los Angeles Rams under Staley. So those connections will continue to build out.
So bottom line, right now it appears like everything. Like, it looks like a good move right now. We don't know. Nobody knows how this is going to play out. But all the information seems to be, you know what? This is a good guy to roll a dice on.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a good place to start, right? There's still a lot of work that has to be done. I think one of the things that you'll consistently hear about Kellen Moore as well, Kellen Moore coming to New Orleans, he won't have a generational running back and a franchise quarterback and one of the best offensive lines you've ever seen assembled and all those other things. But here's the thing. Philadelphia didn't have that at one point either. You have to build that. So the key next step for New Orleans, beyond figuring out the rest of the coaching staff and their quarterback position, is going to be having the patience to build something that's sustainable. So that's going to be the big thing. That and health, right? Those are going to be the big things that need to continue to move forward for New Orleans. But I wouldn't be concerned about Kellen Moore just because of the weapons that he had in Philadelphia. I think you highlight the fact that Kellen Moore knew how to utilize those weapons in a way that absolutely tanked at the end of the 2023 season.
Yeah, all of those guys. Hurts, obviously A.J. Brown, Saquon Barkley had never been better than they were with Kellen Moore. Yes. Ross Jackson, great stuff. We're going to talk again after we hear from Kellen Moore.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.